conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Dr. Carl Peckenkamper.
Yeah, I'm here again.
And Minister Mark Ashton.
What's up?
What's up? All right. Taking the place of Alex with the unique
I love it. We
welcome
needed
every time. Yeah. No, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us again as we continue our series through the end times and the rapture, which is what we're specifically talking about today. We did a great job of dancing around it in the last episode, which I mean is a challenge because these two things go hand in hand. But I do think there is enough for us to chew on specifically when it comes to the rapture and what that means, specifically to Christians and how it will happen, how it'll take place. What does that actually look like? Will the angels come down and neatly fold my clothes and leave them on the airplane seat? As some of the 90s movies displayed. I know as a child, I was just fascinated with it. I don't even know. Part of me, I look back at that and go, did I think I was going to be left behind? Because I seemed really excited to be here for all the stuff going down afterwards. But it is something, I think it just captures the imagination of Christians in a lot of ways. Another side of it that we'll get into a little bit is there's been a lot of discourse on social media lately, I think, of what does it actually mean when Jesus is going to return on the clouds, or what, how are we supposed to think about it, talk about it, and hopefully in this short amount of time we can get somewhere that'll help people process through this and understand it better. But again, thank you for being here for this.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Let's roll, baby.
Boy, indeed. All right. Let's just talk about what the Bible says out of the gate here. When it comes to the rapture, I think in my head, what I've always envisioned since I was a child is I'm going to hear a trumpet. So I've always been scared of trumpet players. No, just kidding. But you're going to hear a trumpet. The clouds are going to open up. But then you're going to also, all the Christians are going to vanish. And it's all this stuff happening at once. It's in concert. I don't know. Are the people left behind? Are they actually going to see Jesus? Are the believers going to see Jesus? But wait, the bodies are coming out of the grave too. So there's a lot of moving parts here that we're trying to account for. Help us understand, what is the rapture? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be fast? Is it going to be slow, like zombies coming out of the graves? Like, is it,
We all float up slowly.
Yeah. Like,
A wave at people.
Saying hello, world.
Goodbye, world.
Goodbye.
Perfect. Well, the one thing we know for sure is that there are so many different images that sometimes even feel contradictory. I mean, like, we're told, for instance, that hell is on fire, but it's dark. Those are sometimes images that are designed to evoke something more general. All over the place of the return of Jesus, we have images, and sometimes they don't line up nice and neatly because they're not designed to. They're designed to evoke images. That's why things like images trouble us, because we, like poetry and metaphor, it works more important. It's more important that we sit and ponder and envision, and we get a lot of our pleasure and satisfaction by the process of meditation more than trying to fit nice things on a timeline or a chronology line. I just don't think that for instance, I look at Matthew 24. I do not see a millennial image going on there. I'm not sure a rapture image is in there either. About the only place historically that we've gone after rapture is in 1 Thessalonians 4. And that's a term that's picked up out of the Latin of all places. The verb is right, but it doesn't. And people complain because it's not in the English. It's in the Latin. That's where it comes from. So, but all that to say, I think we have all kinds of things that are cross purposes, and sometimes we have different images going on. I don't particularly think. I'm not sure we have a rapture in Revelation. I think it can be fit, but it's not obvious from Revelation that it's there. So there's all kinds of ways that we have to engage. This is what makes hermeneutics so much fun, but also complicated. So when we try to lay out a timeline, or when does rapture, I mean, it is a cottage industry right now to sort of discredit the classic definition of rapture, that Jesus is going to, the church is going to get called up in the air somehow. And then we figure out, do we put it before the tribulation, in the middle of the tribulation, after the tribulation, or yes.
We will definitely go there in a couple of minutes, but let me kind of give a basic definition of rapture for folks who may not have been familiar with it. In 1 Thessalonians 4 is really the go-to passage in the Bible to give the best definition. It says the dead in Christ will rise first, and then those who are still alive will meet them in the air or meet them in the clouds. And that there's going to come a day, and I think this is something we can be very confident of, that people who were, previously dead are going to be made alive and are going to be caught up with Jesus.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a moment where that happens not just for those who are dead, but in world history, there's going to be an interruptive moment that those who are alive will also be caught up with Jesus in the air. And it's a real huge moment of hope that all of us look forward to. The controversy around how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen is real. But the idea that it's going to happen, it's as old as the scriptures. As Carl mentioned, the clarity is mostly in 1 Thessalonians 4. But you can find it. I would say you can find it in Matthew chapter 24 as well, where it talks about, one being left and one being taken, one being left, one being taken. There's some possibility of putting it in with 1 Corinthians 15. I see it less so in Revelation, but oftentimes it comes, as Eric mentioned, with the trumpet call as well. That's one of those moments. There's certain things that multiple Bible writers include as a detail that helps you to be able to true up some of the stories and align them with each other. So the trumpet call that comes with the rapture is one of those things. The day of the Lord would be another one of those things that help you to be able to take the various passages that are out there and align them together.
The problem with the day of the Lord, of course, is that the day of the Lord is such a broad term. Is it one day of the Lord on an instantaneous moment? But from the day of the Lord that's when God acts in the future in some sense, or God is coming to act. Now is the day of the Lord. This is when God steps in. So we're not actually sure of the timing. I agree. I don't think it's in Revelation clearly. However, those that are particularly out of a model which is saying this is fulfilling the 70th week of Daniel as a particular word to Israel, they will recognize and see that in Revelation. So that's what makes it complicated. It's not every writer is trying to unfold the same thing in the same way. And if we get that, then we're not frightened by it. Rapture is the caught up language of 1 Thessalonians 4. But the day of the Lord, the very next chapter, is the times and epochs in the day of the Lord. It's very clear that by the time 1 Thessalonians is written, which is a matter of weeks after Paul had visited, the very first thing he talked about was Jesus is coming back. You just heard me talking about that. And now let me fill in a little more detail. So it's very clear early on, among other things, justification by faith. One of the early things is Jesus is coming back. Comfort one another with that assurance that in the suffering that you go through, Jesus is coming back.
I think too, thinking about the rapture, you guys have shared a little bit out of the Bible, like it actually is like it's a biblical thing that's going to happen, but also we are putting a lot of details into our modern culture, and so things get added to it. How can we, I think, sift through of like is there anything that's been just added in our modern world that isn't in the Bible that we're kind of assuming, or
because I think that's even something that's been trending on social media this is a modern concept. The idea of a rapture isn't actually biblical. At least that's the argument people are making.
Right.
So I think it's fascinating to people, and we're kind of assuming like, are we going to vanish before tribulation? Like, what is?
Well, whenever it happens, I can tell you that historically, the early church does not have clear teaching on this, on the rapture. They do appear to have some clear teaching about millennium, this idea of a long period of the reign of Christ. Rapture, while it is in 1 Thessalonians 4, it kind of came out of the early 1800s in England, and some of the pietistic, the religious revival movements that were going on in England, and they're trying to put pieces of this together, and the role of Israel and all this sort of stuff is coming out. And 1 Thessalonians 4 becomes something that Darby, J.N.D. Darby, I think it was.
John Darby, yep.
Yeah, John Darby was involved with. And in the 1830s. And that caught fire in the Brethren community in England and spread rather widely, rather quickly into the United States. It got popularized by a guy by the name of Schofield. C.I. Cyrus something or other, I don't remember. Schofield in the early 1900s publishes, the first time really that notes were actually published with the Bible. And you had his notes, and when he starts describing things that are going on in Rapture, and a lot of things are going on in John 1 and Genesis 1, and he's seeing his notes, and people who didn't have commentaries because nobody could afford them, they had his notes, and that became a foundation, and that way of thinking became very popular in our country, not most of the world, but certainly in English-speaking countries, that particular approach just blossomed. So, yeah, there's a lot of historical roots as to why are we so susceptible. Well, some of it's just because it was done mostly in English. The Germans weren't thinking along that way, and the Belgians, the Africans, and the Asians generally weren't until we got there. And then it followed American thinking on this. So Rapture is a relatively more recent in its current descriptions.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of cool thinking of an airplane where the pilot gets lost. Well, the upside now is that most of those things can land without pilots. They're pretty efficient.
Yeah.
But it was certainly frightening as an image of, good grief, we don't know who's gone. They're folded up and left.
So let me, there's a really important subtlety that takes some, just a little bit of background teaching to throw in order to be able to understand this shift. And it goes back to the idea of the tribulation. What is the tribulation? So Carl mentioned the 70th week of Daniel. Daniel talks about 77s or 70 weeks, and most of them lead up to Jesus, the 69th week. But the 70th week is just kind of left hanging out there.
Yeah.
Well, the New Testament writers pick up on this 70th week theme, this 7 years, and it's become known as a period called the tribulation. And a 7-year period of basically persecution, suffering, difficulties. It's knocked out into 2 sections, 3.5 years on the front side, 3.5 years on the back side. And certain things happen on the front side, certain things happen on the back side. And right at the middle is the abomination of desolation when the Antichrist sets himself up in the temple and blasphemes God and so forth. So there's this entire, idea of the tribulation taking place. Well, the rapture, one of the critical questions that Christians ask around the rapture is, when is that going to happen? Is it going to be before the tribulation, in the middle of the tribulation, in a pre-wrath posture, which is after the midpoint, but before the wrath of God is poured out? Or does it happen at the end of the tribulation? Is there a single resurrection of the saints that happens with the return of Jesus? Christians disagree on this. There is no Christian Missionary Alliance doctrine that's around this. The idea that something like that is going to happen is historic, biblical. They've always believed that there's going to be a resurrection and that we're going to meet Jesus and the living are going to go there and the dead are going to go there. So when I listen to the internet guys and they say the whole idea of rapture was just made up in the 1800s, I go, not really. So the idea of resurrection and the idea of being caught up with Jesus in the air, that's always been there. It's always been a part of the traditional teachings. What's new is the term rapture connected with a pre-tribulation format.
Okay.
So the idea that we'll all be taken out before the tribulation happens, and we'll be safe from all of the pain and destruction, and then it'll be 7 years, and then we'll come back with Jesus. That's the piece that John Darby brought into the equation and that the Schofield Bible popularized, and that's what Left Behind series banks on and all of these popular things that have come up recently. That's also what some of the popular internet people are trying to debunk.
Yeah.
But the problem is they're debunking the whole idea of rapture, which is in the Bible,
Bingo.
without
There it is.
without giving the subtlety that it's actually the premillennial rapture that they're debunking. I would go all the way back to Jesus and his teaching in Matthew chapter 24. And I would say that Jesus says to the disciples, he warns them, trouble is coming and you're going to be a part of it. So the premillennial rapture, in my mind, is a bad idea because it doesn't match Jesus' teachings. Jesus is warning his disciples, you're going to have to go through part of this.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you're taking a look at the system in the book of Revelation that talks about the tribulation in more detail, although in apocalyptic form, there are going to be moments where it's not just hard, like wars, rumors of wars, famines, economic difficulty. I think Christians are going to live through all of those kinds of things. Yeah. But then when the wrath of God is being poured out on this planet in order to create the recreation of the millennial kingdom and the new heavens and the new earth, I think that Christians are going to be spared of. So I would put myself in a pre-wrath rapture viewpoint. I don't know if I've ever heard Carl say, where he stands on this before, but that's kind of what I've taught from the stage a variety of different times. And what Darby introduced was a pre-tribulation rapture, which I would say I find a hard time being biblical. I hope he's right, because I would prefer to not go through pain.
Right.
My choice would be I'd pick that one. But the better way to say it is that Darby and Schofield brought in a pre-tribulation rapture.
Okay. And Carl, I want to hear from you, but you said something that I just want to clarify too. When we say caught up, are we talking about actually caught up, or is that literal, symbolic? You just mentioned that.
Well,
so
and I wonder with that too, like the language of ascension that's used in the Bible for when Jesus returns. That, like, you talk about Paul saying, well, Jesus is coming back. They probably just thought, oh, well, we're going to watch this and rewind. He's just going to descend, right? Like, and come back.
Well, it does say he'll come back in the same way that he came.
Yeah.
And so some people take that phrase in the same way that he came, to mean he's going to come back down on clouds the same way that he was. That puts 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 as a literal physical rapture, which I would just say we don't know if it's literal physical or if it's going to be spiritual. Sometimes Paul uses, physical language, the whole Bible does, to talk about spiritual things. And so the idea that there will be a resurrection, we'll be caught up, the dead go first, the living go second, all of that I think is pretty well ordered. But how it's going to manifest itself physically and spiritually is pretty vague.
Okay.
I would not want to contradict my own pastor on a podcast. But I think when you read Matthew 24, it's pretty clear that they asked Jesus the question of when's it going to happen and what will be the signs of his coming and the end of the age. Now, I think he links the coming and the end of the age pretty clearly, but the when he never answers. And of course, we're told don't bother to waste your time setting dates, so we set dates anyway. But the idea of will we go through? I think we have been through lots of tribulational times. I've looked at the history of Christianity in Japan and how some of those martyrdoms were just unbelievable. I see what Christians have gone through at different periods in history, and I don't see how, other than the symbology of the stars falling and earthquakes happening, I've seen and know of stories of people who have been through really nasty stuff. So will Christians go through tribulation? And the answer is yes, he says he will. And then in the middle of chapter 24, he talks about the great tribulation. And the key to that for me is I'm hesitant to cross writers here to go to Paul, but he's going to talk about the fact that we're not destined for wrath. And the question is the tribulation meant to be wrath in that sense, or is it the final judgment that's the wrath? I think it's the former. That is, that there is a sense in which this time of the unparalleled behavior of evil will be wrathful. As far as the timing, I don't quite go with a mid-trib approach. I'm inclined toward the pre, but my fallback is actually post. Here's the deal. The reason that it's become such a popular cottage industry on the internet is because people are discrediting the image behind 1 Thessalonians 4, and that is drawn out of Roman imagery of the procession. When Caesar, Nero, whoever, Augustus, comes back from wherever he's been off, or just a war that's taken place and he's allowed to be entertained. We see it in 2 Corinthians 2. We're led in procession. That is an ancient word. It's a trigger word for every Roman that sees something happening when the king comes in victorious. And so we, scholars and students of Scripture like 1 Thessalonians 4, will look at 1 Thessalonians 4 and see the king coming. Our job is to go out and meet him. and usher him in. And that becomes the image behind First Thessalonians. I think that image is there. What I don't agree with is that it automatically is bifurcated from the idea of a rapture happening at all. So what you see is various video podcasters and others are putting out things that really the whole rapture idea is just made up nonsense in the 1800s. No, it's not. But it's not to separate from this idea of the procession that takes place, this coming of the King, and we get to come with him and people with him. Both the dead and the living are told to rise. In fact, the dead rise first, and then we get to join them in the midst of that event. And the reason that First Thessalonians is written is because people have already died, and I wondered, are they going to miss this or not? And the answer is no. The dead and the living will be all part of this. So this rapture is a real thing. How it functions and fleshes out, I don't know that either. But this idea of coming on the clouds, that's an Old Testament image because Yahweh rides on the clouds. Yeah. So when Jesus goes into the clouds, this is an incredibly strong image. This is the King who runs the universe. You wait for him. He's worth waiting for.
One thing that you both mentioned is the dead rising first. And I know my own amateur belief on this is that, when people die, they're kind of, the way I process it anyways, they're in like a suspended state, almost like they're sleeping until they rise again. I guess maybe that's just because I struggle with the idea of like my mom watching me go to the bathroom all the time or something like that. Like the idea of people looking down from heaven, and that gets
Are you in therapy for this?
Propagated. Well, I'm just saying that idea gets propagated
we can neither
everywhere.
confirm nor deny.
Everywhere people are like, oh, so-and-so's looking down on me from heaven. And like, and that thought is very, very popular. So I just wonder like what can we look at even in the Bible to say, what does that mean? The dead go first. Does that mean because they've died, they've already gone first? Does that mean because when the rapture happens, they go first? Are they in heaven? Are they going to heaven? Are their souls in heaven in a like limbo state? That sort of stuff where I think people kind of question, what does that actually mean?
And Mark has a fascinating idea that in fact God projects us directly into the end. I don't know if that's true or not. I do get this image of the souls of those who have been sacrificed and martyred are at the altar saying, when is this going to end? Mm-hmm. So it does give you a picture that maybe there's more going on than simply the Adventists go for a soul sleep version of it. Yeah. And the reason is because you're not really fully human if you're just a soul out there. You need to have a body to be human, and we don't want you to do that. So the answer is, we don't know. Yeah. I mean, I'm open to the idea. I have a suspicion that that this disembodied. Paul's going to talk about himself being unclothed in 2 Corinthians 5, as if something isn't quite right until we are clothed. Right. We don't know whether that's a moment, an extended period of time. I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did.
Yeah, there's some fascinating things to unpack there, and I'll play Carl's role and make things even more muddy.
Go for it.
And one of the things that Carl mentioned is I'm really a guy who would advocate for time travel from the point of death to the point of rapture. Yeah. So that we don't experience a disembodied state, either in a sleep, or in awake. But because time works different for God than it works for us, we can instantly be translated to that moment. Yeah. And so the dead in Christ really will be raised simultaneously as the living, and will all come to the same point when Jesus is about to come triumphantly. So it's an interesting thought just to throw in there for all of our people who are not confused enough already. But other thing that's discombobulated but interesting point is if you go to Revelation chapter 19, the wedding supper of the Lamb happens before the return of Jesus. And so you go, okay, what is the wedding supper of the Lamb? Well, that's when the bride of Christ and Jesus are, kind of having our party together. And if you believe, like the Christian Missionary Alliance does, that Revelation 19 through 21 are chronological, then that means that we are with Jesus before Jesus comes back again in the triumphant military pose that's struck in Revelation chapter 19. And so it seems to me, if that's the case, if you're taking Revelation as chronological, that the rapture happens before the wedding supper of the Lamb happens before the return of Jesus. And so it's hard for me to say, okay, that those events are simultaneous, rapture and the return. But I think that they're two different events if you take Revelation as chronological.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although I think you can also project events into the future as a single event. In fact, that they're not a single event. But as you look at them, yeah, I think that's actually a fair question. That does say there is some division of time. The question of whether it's chronological, I'll be a CMA at this point. But I would admit that I find it compelling that Jesus is going to use banquet all over the place. When he gathers Israel together, it's in a banquet. And that's when he works. He comes together and brings them from all corners of the world in Matthew 8. And at that point, every Jew understands that's when God is recreating the world right there.
So another aspect of the rapture that we haven't really addressed is how it's used and how it's presented to people, whether that's in current believers or new believers. And I'd like to just maybe dissect that a little bit, and whether it's helpful or hurtful when we present the rapture as almost this ultimatum to salvation, like this fear-based, hey, if you don't give your life to Jesus, like, bad things are going to happen. You don't know when he's coming back. So that's why you should do it, right? Maybe not the real reason why you should do it, but it's a compelling reason in the moment to say, hey, we don't know the time or the place. Jesus could come back. What are our thoughts on that? It can't, because I feel like a lot of times that got delivered almost as the sole message. It wasn't the whole message. It was just this singular idea of fear-based, oh, I better get my life right because Jesus might come back tomorrow or whatever. I mean, what's the good and bad with that?
I'll throw out two sides to that coin. One is that Paul used the return of Jesus as a compelling reason for faithful living in the light. That's part of 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, as he said, because Jesus is coming back, you should live as children of the light, not as children of the darkness. So for us to be able to do that is perfectly legitimate. It should be a compelling reason for us to say, I want to live for Christ. He could come back at any time. What becomes dysfunctional is living in fear that if you're doing something wrong, Jesus is going to come right now and catch you in the act.
Yeah.
And some people would even say, catch me in the act and I lose my salvation.
Right.
But nothing could be further from the truth in that Jesus is gracious and he's compassionate and he wants to forgive us and he sees us as his kids. And, when my kids, when I catch them in the act, when they're messing around in their bedroom and I catch them in the act, well, they're not out of the family. I might have a stern word for them, but it's not like, oh, you're losing your status in the family. Same thing is true when Jesus comes back again. It should be a compelling reason for us to live with integrity, love people, and for goodness sakes, tell people about Jesus so they can have the good things that we have. But it shouldn't be a reason for us to fear or cower or say, I don't want to be doing the wrong thing the moment that Jesus gets back and have him catch me.
Well, I agree with that. I also think that there's a psychology going on here in some people who are motivated by the fear component and the threat that Jesus has come back and I might get caught, or I've been left behind. Hence the Larry Norman image of too bad we got left behind type of thing. I think that is designed. I'm reasonably comfortable that God will bring everybody he wants when he's ready at his time. And so I find the psychology, I do recognize, and maybe Jess can talk to this, because I've seen people go into therapy growing out of this fear-based, I might miss it and I don't want to miss it. I recognize that. I agree. Sometimes, the potential for going to jail is don't do that.
Yeah.
But that said, there's a psychology that worries me because some people take this way too seriously. I've seen it in my own family. I don't want that to be the driving force. Jesus meets needs. We share Christ because some of us need to be aware of our sinfulness. Some of us need to be aware of our weaknesses, our flaws, our brokenness. I'm up for whatever gets a person, to pay attention, be honest with you, but I don't want to bash them over the head with that approach. It was popular, even in the 1800s. and it's been popular throughout the history of the church is to scare the daylights out of people just to see if we can get them into the kingdom. Does it work? And the answer, yes, it does. And sometimes I got into Christ because of all kinds of reasons, and I found out some of those were stupid reasons, and it still took.
Yeah.
It changed my life, and I knew all kinds of things that were wrong, but I knew that was right.
Yeah, that's good. It's really good.
I just will add to what you said, Carl. I do oftentimes this comes up more often than you would think in a counseling session in my office. I think oftentimes I see it as a lot of people are coming out of family systems where this has been a lot of theology that's been discussed. So it's a lot of what do I believe for myself versus what does my family think. But then I think too, where I sit a lot with people is, what are you putting your identity in? And so a lot of times if my identity is based in the fear that this brings for me or what I don't know, and I'm not putting my identity in the Jesus that came and died for me and saved me and building that faith, when we get so pigeonholed, I think on one thing we tend to put our identity in that, and out of that comes a lot of the first thing we notice is how something makes us feel, and we notice our negative emotions oftentimes first. And so if I feel uncomfortable in that, or I don't feel good about this, then maybe there's something wrong with me, or there's this pressure to figure it out. And then Mark, you said something in our earlier episode that I think also is great to bring here, is that this is a secondary issue and it's not a primary issue. And so I think in that, I guess, I think I like to wrestle with people in a different way than maybe you guys do with it. But that is definitely a part of it.
So based on your responses to my previous question about being prepared, what does that look like in a Christian's life to live ready? Because I really do think that's what it's about. Like you would have a lot less anxiety in your life if you just lived ready and in season and out, as they said when I was a kid. But it's like, what does that look like for someone who's maybe going, okay, I think I understand that. I mean, in really legalistic circles, sometimes I've heard people question, well, what if I was driving and then I cursed someone out because they cut me off, and then I got in an accident and died, and then would I go to hell? Like they get real legalistic about it. What does this mean to live ready for Jesus's return?
Well, I'm reasonably comfortable. That's not a problem. I suspect Mark is in agreement with that one. I've been known to let loose occasionally. It's been a while, but I have real history.
Some road rage in your past.
I grew up in that world. I'm struck by, the whole point after the Matthew 24 is the end of Matthew 24 and Matthew 25 are all a bunch of parables of how to live life. Some of it is the 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5, be ethical, but who's the faithful and sensible slave whom the master will put in charge of his household? Their job is to give food to the people. Their job is to that slave who master finds doing the right things, to feed the household, to in some cases to declare we're ready when he shows up, wherever it is. We're happy. It could be we asleep or awake. I mean, all those images are there. Readiness is a constant state of awareness that God is there and present. And when he decides to flip the switch and change the dynamics, we'll know it. There won't be any missing of it. And good heavens, I think Jesus knows every negative thought I got going on. I'd been in trouble long ago if that was the case. Assurance is a wonderful doctrine. It's not the same thing as security. We could debate the security issue, but does Jesus expect you to be sure that you're right with him? You have the Son, you have life. And with that comes everything that life implies, quantity, quality. I want to say security in that sense, at least. This is your God. And does he know you're a mess up? Oh, yeah. I just have to look in a mirror every day to remind myself I'm glad I'm forgiven.
Yeah.
And I have no greater pleasure in telling myself, dude, you are forgiven. Don't ever take advantage of that. Don't presume it, but be grateful it's there. So I guess I'm just not bothered by the mistakes that we make all the time. I'm bothered by sin. I don't mean that, but does that drive Jesus away? And the answer is no. He hung out with those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's good. I would say that the idea of Jesus coming back is a motivation for holy living. And some of the things that Paul points out in 1 Thessalonians 4 is avoid sexual immorality, don't give your bodies to debauchery like the pagans do, don't get drunk, avoid addictions, don't live like you're in the darkness, live as though you're in the light. And while all those things are true, and it's a good motivation for that, I would just say that the closer you get to Jesus, you realize that living life Jesus' way is just better. Yeah. Whether Jesus is coming back or not, it's just better to live in the truth than it is to live with a bunch of lies. It's better to live in faithfulness than it is to live in adultery. It's better to live in purity than it is to live in addictions. It's just better to live life the Jesus way. And all the things that we would do to prepare for Jesus' return, treat the poor right, be generous with your resources, pay your employees on time, all the things that the Bible says to do, we would just go, this is not just to prepare for Jesus to come back again. This is the Jesus way.
Yeah.
And when he made us to be rescued from our sins, but then not just rescued from our sins, but to be sanctified, to be changed, to live life totally differently. And a lot of the warnings that you see in there are warnings that would lead you to live the Christ life, which is the better life.
Right.
And so, to say I'm living in fear and I'm, sailing straight and flying level because Jesus is coming back again. You should just fly level because the Christ life is better.
Yeah.
It's the way that God designed us to live.
Amen.
And when you're in the slipstream of the supernatural, you're like, why would I run to sin? I mean, it's worse. It's like, eating poop instead of eating turkey. It's like, why would you go there?
Yeah, don't do that.
Because it lies to us.
Yeah.
Sin lies. It's deceitful. It tells you lies, and we hear them.
Yeah.
And we get caught in those lies, and we think, that's a good idea. I mean, what person on your block thinks that people sleeping around the block is a great idea? Nobody thinks this. They think that telling the truth matters. And it causes human flourishing, for crying out loud. So, all that stuff it's like so obvious, but we don't do it anyway. That's the problem of sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, poop in an appealing package. That's it's marketing.
Yeah.
Poop that looks like turkey.
Quick, step on it. Oh, no.
I mean, again, it's a topic where my mind goes to even like, what I'd like to get an economist in here to talk about the ramifications of the rapture and all these people leaving the planet. Like, what would happen to our economy? And there's just so many things that we could, the rabbit trails we could go down. But I think focusing on our heart's transformation over these timelines of rapture and end times is probably the more important thing. And I love how you put that, Mark. I think that's really encouraging to be like, when you're living that Christ life, why would you let yourself be derailed by sin?
I'm going to say this because this is probably going to anticipate whatever else you talk about. And but what Jesus is saving us for, and I'm going to say this carefully, isn't heaven.
Mm-hmm.
It's for the new heaven, new earth. When he puts the earth and heaven, God's presence, back into the same alignment like it was supposed to be. And when that happens, all the things that we're living or think we should live now will make even more sense. Because it's not like we're going to sit around and play harps in a cloud somewhere. What God apparently intends to do is to merge his presence with the world recreated. And all we get to do now is to begin to live out some of those characteristics, some of those qualities, some of those fruit of the Spirit. Those kinds of things get to be lived out now. And you want to begin to be an outpost for that age. That's what we get to do now.
Yeah.
But this idea that, we're just going to get, that's the problem with the rapture doctrine. It just takes us out like it's a big evacuation.
Yeah.
When in fact, what he's going to say, no, I'm not taking you out. I'm going to recreate everything around you. And the whole world's going to change, and that world is worth living in. We can get that. I've never forgotten having been in a session with an academic scholar looking at us and saying, what he's doing is he's not telling you to go to heaven. He's creating a new heaven and new earth.
Yeah.
Everything gets changed over, and all we become is outposts now, anticipating that, living into that now. And so it makes no sense to live against the grain of the universe that God's going to create.
That's right. That's right.
It's good. All right. Yeah. Did we get it all out there?
Yeah,
It's
that to
it's
me
a
is
marathon,
revolutionary
of
right
information.
there.
Yeah, that's really good. All right. Well, not to wrap it up too quickly, but I think we got there. I think we got to a lot of the important points about the rapture. There's still so much more we could dive into.
And we got the poop and turkey thing.
But the
That's
poop,
true.
that was
I
good.
Got to
you
get
know.
the humor in there.
You got your Mark's working on his type 5 for stand-up routine.
That's for podcast, not stage.
No, but we do have a couple more episodes coming up that we're going to be diving into other aspects of the end times and rapture. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again, Mark, Carl. Appreciate your time as always. It's enlightening and encouraging to have you on. So thank you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to us as always on social media, whether that's Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org or leave us a voicemail at 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.